Hello, and welcome to the Redefine Instruction webcast series, where we bring a fresh perspective on learning and development with every single episode. Go ahead, grab a cup of coffee or your favorite drink, and enjoy a few moments talking about L&D with me. Hi, my name is Sandhya Lakhanbal, and I am your host for this series. Subscribe to our webcast or look out for new episodes on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or log on to redefineinstruction.com for the latest trends on L&D. In this episode, I speak with Donald Becker, Learning and Development Specialist with American National. Don has many years of experience in instructional design and brings a diverse background from K-12 and Corporate L&D. In addition to a master's in Instructional Technology with a specialization in game theory and design from the University of Houston Clear Lake and a bachelor's in psychology from the University of Houston, he is currently pursuing a doctorate in instructional systems design and technology at Sam Houston State University. In his time working in K-12, higher education, and corporate levels, Don has been involved in implementing several innovative learning experiences for learners. His expertise in adult learning theory and passion for professional growth makes him a sought-after facilitator and public speaker. Don has delivered over 200 science, educational technology, and instructional design presentations at the local, regional, state, and national levels, and has twice been a featured speaker at regional science-focused conferences. In addition to other accolades, Don is also a published author with several research-based articles in instructional design. His research focuses on implementation of gamification techniques to increase soft skills development in the workplace. In this episode, Don discusses various ways in which instructional designers can choose to distinguish themselves in the market. He presents a unique perspective where leveraging a university degree to upskill design skills can position you strategically in the job market. He also talks about choosing mentors to nurture growth, networking with a purpose, skills required by L&D professionals, key conferences to attend, identifies important skills to be successful as a designer, and much more. Stay on till the end of the episode to uncover this and other great advice from Don Becker. With that, I'd like to welcome Don. Hi, Don. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me on this episode of Redefine Instruction.
Hi, good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well. So, Don, I'm going to start off with your journey and where you're at. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey into instructional design and how it all began and where you're at right now?
Oh, sure. My journey is, I find my journey to be, when I look back on it, when I kind of reflect on my life, my journey has been a winding road, to say the least. It actually started out with my first job.
Oh, really?
My first job when I was 16 years old, I started working at Eckerd Drugs as a pharmacy technician. And I grew up with technology. My dad worked for NASA, so I had like this old VIC-20 computer that was in my house at like 4 or 5 years old, right?
Wow.
So I've lived with technology nearly my entire life, and so I was very comfortable with it. And so when I turned 18. The district manager at the time, he actually promoted me to being a district trainer, because Eckerd's was beginning to roll out these new, updates to their computer system, to their file systems, to automated phone systems. There's a lot of we think of now, it's ubiquitous, but at the time there was new things that were beginning to come out. And so he said, since I had the experience with technology, I understood it a lot better. He asked me to go ahead and to be a trainer and to train all of our 40 stores in our district about how to use these new things. Mm-hmm. So I'm 18 years old. I'm driving to these pharmacies where I'm talking to pharmacists that are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s years old, and they're looking at me like I am the dumbest person that has ever existed. They're like, "You're 18. What can you teach me? I've got so much more experience, right?"
Right.
And so that was my first foray into really learning and development. But I really found that I liked it. And once I kind of was able to build up a little credibility, they really began to embrace me. But I reached a point in time where I kind of hit a glass ceiling at Eckerd's. I'm like, well, I can't really go any farther than what I'm at without, you know, without further education, things like that. So as I'm getting my bachelor's degree, and then I do get my bachelor's degree, I'm like, okay, well, what's next? Do I want to continue in this, or do I want to do something else? So what I ended up doing is I ended up going into teaching, actually. I, I, I cold called every single community college in the Houston area. And I said, hi, do you have any positions available for an adjunct professor for your pharmacy technician program? One school finally said, you know what? Actually, this guy that was going to be teaching this class is really, really sick and is not going to be able to do it. He just dropped out. Do you think you'd be able to do this? And I'm like, yeah, sure, of course. This is Thursday afternoon. And I was like, okay, when's the class start? Saturday.
Oh, wow.
Just give me a textbook and a syllabus and we're good to go, right? So turned around, taught that class, ended up becoming the director of the pharmacy technician program at that college for a little while. And then it really didn't call to me anymore. I felt like pharmacy had kind of run its course in my life. And I'm like, okay, well, I still love teaching. I love the whole aspect. What could I do next? So I became actually an 8th grade science teacher. And taking all that knowledge of how people learn and then translating into something else that I loved, which was science, was so much fun. And then, it's people find out that you're really good with technology and they're like, hey, can you help me with this? Hey, can you help me with that?
Right.
And then I get promoted to be an instructional coach. And then from there, I move actually back into higher ed as an instructional technology coordinator. So now I'm taking that learning theory and then that foundational learning that I had of instructional design and kind of combining them into doing this. And that led me to want to pursue my master's degree in instructional design, which then I got, and then began becoming an adjunct professor at University of Houston Clear Lake, and then running my own instructional design business for a number of years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so it was just kind of step by step, all these different, this experience in learning and teaching and all that stuff kind of brought me to now where I'm at. I work for American National Insurance Company now as an instructional designer. My official title is Learning and Development Specialist, but really, in essence, I do a lot of instructional design and facilitation for the leadership development program here.
Wonderful.
And that's been my journey.
Wow.
It's wild and crazy, that's for sure. It has been
it's a very interesting one, and I think this really resonates with the topic at hand. Is you bring your career has really culminated into all the different components that you dived into. You have the curriculum instruction, you have the trainer experience, you have the higher ed, you have K-12, and it all kind of culminated into where you're at right now. So I'm going to digress from our script a little bit and ask you, and there's a lot of people during this pandemic who are looking to transition, right? Who are coming from that K-12 or higher ed space and looking to transition into instructional design. In your experience, what is the biggest gap for people, right? They definitely are at an advantage because they bring that curriculum instructional design piece, and a lot of them are really good at technology as well. But the instructional design in the corporate sector is a completely different animal, right? So with the strengths that they bring, where do you think the gaps lie? Like, what is the biggest jump for somebody coming from education into instructional design in the corporate sector?
So I think, really I think the biggest gap, what ends up happening with someone transitioning from academia to corporate, is the style of communication. I really believe that's because you don't have to worry about learning theory. You have the learning theory because you're an educator. You understand how people learn and why they learn. Right. And so that's already got you 10 steps ahead of a lot of other instructional designers that don't have that foundation. Mm-hmm. But it's the method of communication about how you are working with, because teaching to children, K-12 or even higher ed, teaching to students is a lot different than teaching to adults that are already in their field, because they already have a schema. They already have a foundation to work on. you are taking that to the next level. You are working with a subject matter expert, trying to pull out their knowledge and then transfer it that can be that someone else can learn from. And
Right.
so it's really the style of communication, I believe, is where the biggest gap falls in that transition from academia to the corporate world. I'm lucky, I think, because I did have that time period from academia to corporate where I was kind of running my own business, and honestly, I was learning those skills kind of on the fly about how to communicate a little bit different. I had the benefit of being able to do. I taught a lot of workshops and conferences, and so it was, I was used to talking that way. But now that was my only way to talk, it was a little bit of a transition. But I think that's going to be the biggest skill gap for anyone going from academia to the corporate world.
Yeah, and I do want to call out the piece where you said working with SMEES, right? In a lot of times in the higher ed space, not as an instructional designer, but when you're actually the instructor, or in the K-12 space, when you're actually working in curriculum design, you are the SME plus the designer,
Yes.
right? Your
Absolutely.
roles kind of gel over there. With the corporate sector, you are not the expertise in the subject matter. You are the expert in the design element, in the curriculum piece of it. So you're really in that consultative advisor kind of role where you bring the expertise on the instructional element, the design element, the e-learning piece of it, and all of that. And the other thing is that adults bring their own barriers, right? Kids, a lot of ways,
Absolutely.
are open books. They're ready to receive that information. With andragogy, you have that barrier of that affective filter, in addition to the schema, which can be used to our benefit. So right on, where the gap is concerned, that you have to kind of learn to work with your audience. That's where it all starts. So I'm also intrigued by the fact that you went back for a master's degree in instructional design. There's not a lot of people. Well, first of all, there's not a lot of universities. Years ago, they did not have all of this instructional design in the master's certification program. In your experience, did you learn a lot from your master's program, or were there still gaps after you finished the master's and you kind of were left on your own to fill in those gaps?
I had two incredible mentors at University of Houston Clear Lake, and they are two of the I couldn't have been blessed with two greater people in my life to help me in this transition. In working with my master's, working in my instructional design. Dr. Brenda Weiser and Dr. Jana Willis are two of, in my opinion, the greatest humans that have ever walked the earth. They are just the best mentors possible. Both of them were instrumental in really kind of encouraging me to start working on my master's. And Dr. Weiser, she's more on the academia side, academia focus, K-12, a lot of that. And while Dr. Willis is more on the instructional design side. So both of them kind of help foster those skills in me. And they just brought out in my opinion, kind of the best in me. And they really prepared me for moving on and going what I needed to do. I did go back for my master's degree after, I'd had my bachelor's for a number of years when I went back to get my master's. And so I think that what I learned by getting my master's degree, and I think one of the great things about the program that I went through was it was taking a further, a deeper step with that learning theory, and going into the instructional design theory. It's like how to properly design instruction, how we can integrate the learning with the instruction, and to really create the best product possible. It was very little focus on the actual tools, which I personally think is the best. I really like that about the program is I can pick up a tool anyway, but when I have that foundational knowledge of why something is effective as an instructional tool because of these things that help people learn.
Right.
I think that's really what gave me I think that's why that program was the best for me and allowed me to be successful going forward after that.
Interesting. So I spot on with the tool piece, right? That is one of the things that people struggle with coming out of a university. And that's one of the reasons why people are sorting other resources to upskill themselves, especially those who've already finished their baseline degree, right? People who have their bachelor's and are really looking for the skills to get into the corporate sector. And the biggest complaint that I hear is there's a lot of theory and there's not enough tool and practical application. But you had that strength in you just from your prior experience. For someone who doesn't have those resources, doesn't have the experience that you had before you got into your master's, are there resources out there? Are there organizations that they can join to upskill themselves? And I think your piece was also combined with the experience that you brought from your training. Plus, you had these two great mentors, right? Yeah. Which I think is one of the resources that people should absolutely leverage in their life, is to go seek out a mentor, right? But in the absence of those tools or those pillars of support, are there any resources that live out there that new professionals can leverage?
So that's a great question. And I really think that in terms of resources, there's so many out there, but I think the best ones that we're looking for, if you have the opportunity for those, I think LinkedIn Learning does a fantastic job of getting that foundational learning about the tools that instructional designers use. Mm-hmm. I think it's a great resource. I think it's very, very valuable that there's lots of things out there to help understand the foundational use of some of these tools that are available. Professional organizations. I think being a part of a professional organization, even as a student, every professional organization has a student membership. Mm-hmm. And finding those ones that are the best for you and where your path wants to take you as an instructional designer, because you could be an instructional designer in academia as well as in the corporate world. So finding those professional organizations, and I mean, ATD is an absolutely fantastic one, I believe. It works for both academia and the corporate world. If you're going to say continuing in the corporate world, I think the Learning Guild is a fantastic one as well. They it's a free membership and they've got online conferences and things like that. I think that's a great one. If you're staying more towards academia, SITE is a great conference. Mm-hmm. It's the Society of Informational Technology and Teaching and Education. Wonderful. Absolutely outstanding, but that's more academia focused.
Interesting. Thank you.
And there's
Go ahead. Oh, I'm just making note of all these wonderful resources that even I wasn't aware of.
Sure, and then there's another organization. It's called AECT.
Yes, I love that organization.
I love that. The Journal of Applied Instructional Design. That is it. If you're a new person that's trying to get into that tells you how people are using those theories in practice and are writing about it, telling you about the successes and failures of what they're doing. And so I think that even if you're not in academia, I think being able to use that as a resource to really as a learning tool, I think is absolutely fantastic. So that's just a small sampling of the resources that I kind of go to.
I'm calling it incredible. You've got an entire list going from me here, and I was aware of some of them, but you've identified some new ones. So this is great, Don. Thank you. So sure. Let's pivot to the skills part of it, right? There are some critical skills that are basically needed to work as a designer, right? The curriculum piece is one, the tools piece is another, but it's really the pieces of the puzzle, right? If you were to do a 360-degree view of all the skills that a designer would need to be successful in their job, what are some of those skills? Can you identify them for me?
Yeah, I think the core tools, I think you can probably break it down into 4 things.
Okay.
Is number 1, having a solid foundation of learning theory. Number 2, strong project management skills. Number 3, communication skills. And then the last one is critical thinking skills. I think those are probably the 4 essential tools, 4 essential skills that an instructional designer needs to be successful. I mean, understanding the learning theory, how people learn. I mean, your job, it's in the title, instructional design. You have to know how people learn so that way you can design something that's going to maximize that learning.
Right. Right.
You know, project management, you know, being able to, you know, as an instructional designer, you got multiple balls in the air. I currently, at this exact moment, I'm working on 9 projects.
Wow.
And that's a lot of stuff to manage. And so you have to be able to be organized and manage those projects, so that way nothing falls through the cracks.
Right. Right.
Communication. I mean, we mentioned it earlier, you know, how to talk to someone, what's the best way to communicate. And communicate, you're communicating with peers, with leaders, with subject matter experts, with external partners, internal partners. There's a plethora of people that you're going to be talking to. And you need to be able to get that information out that you need to create the best learning possible. Because nothing, it is just terrible when you think you've got everything and it's like, oh no, I've got this big hole here. Now I need to go back to the subject matter expert and ask them, you know, more questions. And maybe you're not asking the right questions to get the right answer. And then you're not going to create something that's going to be the most effective.
Right, right.
So
and that's another one of those skills, questioning skills, right?
Yeah.
To get the right information.
Yes, that needs analysis is just that's the foundation for what you're going to be doing. You
Exactly.
got to ask the right questions so you get the right answers.
Exactly, exactly. And also to bring out the fact that you identified so many of these stakeholders, each one of them speak a different language, right? The way you speak to a leader would be very different from way you would speak to a subject matter expert who is on the ground giving the information at the grassroots levels, versus a leader would probably want maybe 5 bullets of high level 30,000 foot view, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like what the information and the length of time that you have available to talk to someone, to a subject matter expert, is going to be a lot different than what you're going to have to talk to, you know, a vice president. Right. You know, you got, you know, 15 minutes maybe versus like an hour.
Right.
So,
right. 15 minutes is on the higher side.
Right. Yeah. You're lucky if you get 15 minutes.
Exactly. Exactly. And the way I like to put it is, instructional design is half the piece of the pie. The other half is your SME and your experts that live on the other end, because I won't be able to do the job without both the pieces of the puzzle.
That's right. It has to be a symbiotic relationship. It has
exactly. And a lot of times as adults, because of the filters that you bring, people are not forthcoming with that information. And that's where your questioning skills, your relationship building, your rapport comes in, to how to work that personality to get the information that you need in the time that you've been given, right?
Yeah.
Lots of constraints.
Sometimes that timeline is really, really tight.
Exactly, exactly. So in the pandemic, a lot of people are kind of gravitated towards this L&D space. Question number 1, is there a demand for instructional designers in the market? And if there is, are there certain industries that are demanding designers more, or are kind of gearing up towards L&D more versus the others?
That's a great question. And judging by my LinkedIn, yes, there is a demand for instructional designers. I probably get at least a message a week from people that is like, hey, you know, we'd be interested, you know, would you mind applying for this job? We'd be interested in you. So, you get those messages on a regular basis. I mean, I actually am on LinkedIn right now, and I just did search for instructional designer jobs. There are currently 6,205 in the United States.
Oh, wow.
And even just looking at some of the industries that's looking for it, I'm looking at Amazon, Tesla, Salesforce. I see numerous universities. I'm starting to see K-12 as well. I think that's been one of the biggest changes, is the need for an instructional designer in the K-12 arena. As I mentioned earlier, it was a decade ago, I was working as an instructional technology coach in the K-12 arena. And I was looked at like I was speaking a foreign language. No, we'll never need any of this. We'll never need to have this. I can design my courses, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when this pandemic hits, how we design that hybrid type of learning or that online type of learning, teachers are experts on creating their curriculum, developing their curriculum, teaching their curriculum. Right. But how to translate that into self-paced online learning or things like that, it's not a skill that they've needed to develop. And because of the pandemic and the transition now of being, maybe not all the time face-to-face learning, hybrid learning, or just straight online learning, you're starting to see a lot more of a demand in the K-12 space as well for instructional designers. But as I'm looking at this, there's industries, every industry that I can see here is looking for some kind of instructional designer. There's there's automotive dealerships that are looking for instructional designers. I never would have imagined that.
Right, right.
So there is a lot of demand out there for the skills that we as instructional designers can bring to an organization.
Right, right. Yeah, interesting you brought up the automotive industry. We had to replace a car last year. And as I was test driving the car, the guy says, okay, so what do you do for a living? Like an instructional design can be a hard job to describe to someone, right?
Oh yeah.
So I have figured out a workaround. Like, you know how when you were hired into your position, you had to take all of these trainings to upskill yourself? He's like, yeah, you had to sit on the computer and you take a bunch of courses. I'm like, yeah, I designed those courses. And for a minute, he's like, for real? I'm like, yes, for real. Like, this is a real job. Yeah,
Somebody had to do it.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up the car industry, because all of those fun videos that you watch and user guides that are in the video format, that is done in the background by people like you and me. We sit and do it day in, day out. And it's more than just playing with the tools. There's much more to that job. Like that's just the tip of the iceberg. Sure. So I'm going to give you one final question. For people who are, students or new professionals, are there any big conferences that you would recommend, where they can go out and network? And maybe I can throw in and make it a two-part question. Is there a meaningful way that people can network, whether in or outside of those conferences?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. How much time do you have for me to give you this answer?
Well, you have about all day.
So I think there are a couple different specifically network. I'll address them one at a time, because I think that one definitely leads into the other.
Right.
We're looking at networking. LinkedIn, absolutely, I think is a great way. There are tons of instructional designers out there. Just learning development specialists. I have, in my recommendations right now, I see there's 20 people just right there in that box that I could connect with right now, that are in the same job role as me, or the same job role that I want to be, whatever I'm looking for. So definitely LinkedIn. Professional organizations, again, like I said, ATD, AECT, all those different things that I think are fantastic, because they all have student memberships and they all have networking events as well. So, because, ATD has, a meeting about, some sort of professional development or something like that meets very regularly, for example. Attend one of those and just start talking to people and start looking. Being able to network, to advocate for yourself, I think is a big thing.
Right.
Because, we can go to as many networking events that we want, but if we don't talk to anybody, what value does it have?
Right.
You have to be able to advocate for yourself and go out and actually talk to people. And the best way to do those networking is not only being a part of those memberships, but then also going to the conferences that are tied to those memberships as well, because then you already have something in common, because you're part of the same organization. And now you have at least a starting point to talk up, because you're in your field, right? So ATD 21, the upcoming conference, it's going to be face-to-face now versus last year being virtual. It's going to be a mix. So I think that's an outstanding conference. My favorite conference as an instructional designer is DevLearn. I went in 2019. Of course, couldn't go in 2020, but I went in 2019, and it was just absolutely the most incredible for developing skills of any conference that I had gone to. And this is even as my time as a teacher as well. I got so many great ideas, just lists and pages of notes that I took to develop myself. If you're wanting to stay towards the academia, like I mentioned earlier, SITE is an absolutely magnificent conference. And if you're lucky enough to even try to write a paper to get it presented there, that's even better. I actually went to a site in 2019. I was blessed to actually be able to present a paper there, and to be able to network with other people that have that same kind of higher education perspective and thoughts on developing that learning theory and instructional design theory was outstanding. I felt home. It was just great to network with those people during that time. So I think for anyone that's interested in networking and conferences and wanting to grow, I think that's a great starting point is those that I'd mentioned.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Don, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I think that any one of these topics, we could go on for hours, and I would love to pick your brain on any one of them, but I would love to have you come back for another episode, and thank you for speaking with me and my audience today.
Sure, I would love to come back anytime.
Thank you for listening to the Redefine Instruction webcast series. We welcome feedback. Leave a comment or question on any of our social media pages. We look forward to hearing from you. Until then, stay tuned for the next episode.